you have to have a place for all people, not just people who are giving you money. That's the thought is, well, there's people who listen and there's people who pay me. There's people who listen who will pay you eventually if you can nurture that relationship enough. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasts all the time. I am your host, Kevin Palmieri. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode. It was episode number 10, the top 5 mistakes podcasters are making. Today, for episode number 11, how to turn your podcast into a business. So one of the most common questions I get asked is, how do you make money from a podcast? And the framing of that question is important, because when you think of making money from a podcast, there's a big difference between making $20 a month off of sponsorships versus actually making it a business where it is a sustainable way for you to create profit and maybe change the way you live, change the way your finances are structured, and get into podcasting full time. So my goal in this episode today is not to go super crazy, super deep, because I do believe it won't land with many people. My goal in this episode is to first talk about what makes a podcast a business, and then talk about how you can structure your podcast and your social media, really making sure that you have all of the important touch points in order to turn your podcast into a business. So one of the things I'll say right off the bat, for most people, having your podcast and turning it into a business is not going to be from sponsorships, from ads, or from affiliate marketing. Most people just do not get the amount of downloads that would actually make that sustainably profitable. Yeah, you can do it and maybe make $200 a month if you know somebody and you can say, hey, do you want to promote this product on my podcast? That's great. And that's a way to do it, but that's not a business. Right? That's not necessarily a business. That's you getting paid to do a hobby or maybe to cover your expenses. What I'm going to talk about is a coaching model. I'm going to talk about if you are a service-based podcaster. I have something on my nose and it's unreasonably itchy. I must scratch it quickly. If you're a service-based podcaster where you're talking on your podcast about solving your potential clients' problems, this is the jam, and this is what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so first thing, for most people, there is a misunderstanding, for most podcasters, there's a misunderstanding that if I start a podcast, I post about it on social media, people are going to reach out to me and they're going to say, how do I give you my money? How do I give you money to work with you? How do I exchange finance for value? Will that happen? Yes, occasionally. Will that happen the vast majority of the time? No. People say often, well, the podcast is free marketing. Sure, I like that frame. I understand that frame. Yes, the podcast is free marketing. But the problem is it's value-based marketing, not marketing driven to get people to work with you necessarily. Because if you're doing it that way, a lot of people can sniff that out and it doesn't really work that way, okay? So this is what I want you to think of. Think of this. When I say, how is your business set up? What do you think? Do you think, well, I just jump on the mic and I think people are going to reach out to me? Okay. I post on social media and I do the podcast and I think, I hope people are going to reach out to me. Okay. I post on social media. I have a podcast. I have coaching that I talk about. I think that people are going to reach out to me. Okay. So those are 3 different versions of the same story. This is what I would say. I want you to imagine a triangle that is upside down. So an upside down triangle. This is going to be your business model. Some people will say a business funnel. I want you to think of this. The ultimate goal is to get the most amount of people into the top of the business model, thus transitioning them down to the bottom of the business model. That really is the thought at the end of the day. So this is the frame for you. Imagine, we'll just use Mercedes. Imagine Mercedes-Benz, the car company, runs a commercial and it's seen by 1 million people, right? That's the top of their business model, is probably marketing. It's seen by 1 million people. Say out of 1 million people, 1,000 people reach out and book a test drive. And out of the 1,000 people that reach out and book a test drive, 100 of them actually show up and test drive. Out of the 100 that actually show up and test drive, 10 buy a vehicle. Just imagine that, okay? That's an upside down triangle. It starts with a high number, and at the bottom of the business model, the business funnel, it's less. The ratio is less. The conversion rate is less. So therefore, there are less people. This is how I would set up your podcast business. And I'll go deeper into it as I go. But the top of your business model, the top of your funnel, the biggest opportunity for you to impact people with the least amount of your time and bring people to the next layer of your business, most likely is social media. Roughly 65% of podcasts are found on social media through posting, through people sharing it, through word of mouth, whatever it may be. So social media is a very, very, very important part to any podcast. I think more important than most people realize. Many of the calls I do, yes, it's framed a podcast breakthrough session, but a lot of the times I'm talking about the importance of social media, the importance of a Facebook group, the importance of whatever else it may be. So layer one, the biggest layer on the top of your business is social media. From social media, where do people go next? Ideally, it would be the podcast. So you have social media, which is branded in a way that is congruent with your podcast, right? So say you have, we'll just say holistic self-improvement is what we talk about. Our podcast is holistic self-improvement. Much of the content on my social media is in brand. It's on brand with holistic self-improvement. So you have social media, then you have your podcast. Now, this is one of my favorite questions in the world to ask people. After your podcast, where do people go? And then I just wait. Some people will say they don't go anywhere. Some people will say, oh, I've never really thought of that. A lot of people will say, well, I hope they'll reach out to me directly. Okay. This is what we call a kink in your business model, a kink in your funnel. So if you think of it like a hose, when you bend a hose, there's a kink and it stops the water from going from one end of the hose to the other because it gets stuck in the middle at that kink. Usually, from what I have seen, the kink in people's podcast businesses is they stop adding free value and they assume people will pay. So this is what I would do instead. You have your social media, which is value-based. You're adding value to your demographic based on what they find valuable. Your podcast, same thing. So social media, podcast. Under the podcast, I think you should have some sort of group. WhatsApp group, Discord group, Facebook group, whatever group it is. A group where you can work on nurturing relationships, okay? And again, I'll walk through this with an overview at the end. But after that, I suggest that you have some sort of branded freebie. So it could be 5 ways to build confidence. It could be 5 ways to make your relationship better. It could be any number of things. If you go on our website, so again, I have another podcast called Next Level University. If you go on our website, you'll see we have a free course. Okay, it's totally free. It's video content that we spent a lot of time doing, but we understand the importance of having more free value than you're asking for financially. So we have social media, podcast. I would say some sort of group, Facebook group, whatever it is, some sort of freebie, and then you can get into paid. But you have to understand that the conversion rate between the amount of listens you're going to have and the amount of clients you're ultimately going to get is going to depend on a couple things. It's going to depend on, 1, how much your audience base knows you, likes you, and trusts you. Number 2, how much you're warming them up throughout the business. So this is what a lot of people think. Well, you listen to me, you're naturally going to just reach out and DM me. Yeah, that'll happen, but not as often as you think. What has to happen is you have to get somebody to say, okay, I found this person on social media. I found Kevin on social media. And then I saw one of his teaser clips. And I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize Kevin had a podcast. Oh, let me self-identify as I am the type of person who would listen to that podcast. Let me tune into the podcast. On the podcast, you might hear us talking about Next Level Nation, our free private Facebook group, where you can meet other like-minded individuals. Oh, I've been looking for a community of like-minded individuals. Let me get in there. Cool. The point of the Facebook group is engagement more than anything. We're not trying to sell in the Facebook group. We don't promote anything paid, I don't think ever, in the Facebook group, maybe group coaching. So from there, you might say, oh, I'm in this Facebook group. Where do I go next? Oh, I listened to an episode recently and they said that they have a free course. Let me download that free course. Okay, cool. And you can see how, yeah, it's about listens. The amount of listens you have is very important, but it's about the amount of engaged listeners you have. Somebody who has moved through all layers of the business are way more likely to work with you than somebody who just listens. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. They think that producing the podcast content is enough or promoting it on social media is enough. Yeah, you'll get some conversions. We've had some people reach out cold that we've never heard of who have given us money. That's awesome. But I will tell you, most of these people who do that are very high when it comes to taking risks. They're not very risk averse, AKA they're not afraid of spending money, even if they don't understand if they're going to get value back. That's just how some people are. Some people are very into investing in themselves and they'll throw $150 or $1,000 at something and just say, yeah, I'll give it a shot and see what happens. Not everybody is like that. So I really want you to think of this question. 2 questions. Number 1, why would somebody follow me on social media? Number 2, where do they go from there? And then I want you to ask those questions for each layer of your business model. This is my favorite question. Why would somebody listen to the podcast? Somebody will give me an answer. And then I say, why would they jump straight to giving you money? And that's usually where people say, oh, you know what? They probably wouldn't because maybe I'm not doing a good job of adding value based on what they want to hear, what they need to hear. Maybe I haven't been promoting myself as a coach through testimonials or, my own client stories and lessons and examples. You have to understand that you have to build a relationship. One of the best things about podcasting is you're building a real relationship with the person on the other side of the earbuds or the speaker in the car, wherever they're listening to. Wherever they're listening from. But you need to think to yourself, okay, well, have I ever heard something on a podcast and then just immediately given money for it? Maybe you have. Maybe you're somebody who has a high risk tolerance. I would say the majority of people would say no, right? No, I've never just listened to a podcast and then given them money. But if you think about the things that you are most invested in, right? Think about people who are super fans of TV shows. They probably follow the accounts on social media. They're probably in the Facebook groups. Maybe they go to conventions, they watch the show, and maybe they buy things. Maybe they have bought all the DVDs to have at home. Maybe they buy the merchandise or the swag. You never know, right? But that's the level of investment that you want from your community based on value. When I say how to turn your podcast into a business, this is really what I'm saying. You have to find a way to add value at every single one of your business model levels while also thinking to yourself, how and why would somebody go to the next layer of my business? That is the name of the game. And I think a lot of people want to take the shortcut of, well, I'm just going to do the podcast and then I know the clients will come. It doesn't really work like that. I was on a call yesterday. I did a podcast breakthrough session with somebody. I went on their podcast. And again, I'm doing free podcast breakthrough sessions, not going to sell you on anything.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hurvitz. So last year, I wanted to quit everything. I wanted to throw in the towel. I wanted to hang up my microphone. And Kevin said no. Kevin said, keep going, Jen. You've got this. And oh my God, I'm going to cry. And I did. Coaches need coaches, y'all. And working with Kevin has been one of the best experiences of my life. Oh my God, I'm crying. Kevin, you are the best. I could not do this without you. And thank you. Thank you for being you and the amazing human that you are.
This is an example of what it kind of looks like. I said, okay, walk me through your business. And he said, well, Kev, you know the old saying, if you build it, they will come. Unfortunately, that's not happening. And I walked this gentleman through the same thing I'm talking to you about. And I said, okay, well, what are you doing after the podcast? Where do they go? And he said, well, ideally, they go into the bank account. And I said, I understand, ideally, but where would you go? Would you just pay somebody right off the top? Or would you want to be part of a community? Would you want more value? So it really is how many pieces of value can you add before you ask for any money? A lot of people are thinking of a podcast business like any other business. And it's a little bit different where, I might have a watch that I like the design for and I I buy. My wife actually bought me this as a wedding present. But it's a little bit different with a podcast because you're relying on the power of the community and the investment of your listener to actually build the business. So that's the most common problem I see, is there's not enough layers in the business. Now, can you get too many layers? Sure. Our business model for our podcast and our business, we have 25 layers, and that's a lot of layers. But number one, we have a good amount of listens. Number two, we have a very engaged community who we work on building and strengthening and getting to know and adding value to every single day. And then the third point is this: we also have a ton of free value. Out of the 25 business layers that we have, I think at least half are free. So our business model is set up very much in a way where it's social media, it's the podcast, then this podcast, then there's the Facebook group, and we have a weekly live podcast that we do. We have a monthly virtual event. We do free speeches. We do free live trainings. I go on other shows. There's a lot of things that we're doing long before we ever ask somebody for money, because it's really about who can add the most value. So this is the thought. Number one, do you have an actual business where you have different layers where people are going to go? This is the thing. If you really want to turn your podcast into a business, you have to have a place for all people, not just people who are giving you money. That's the thought is, well, there's people who listen and there's people who pay me. There's people who listen who will pay you eventually if you can nurture that relationship enough. And that's where the social media, the Facebook group, the freebie, the live training, the free speeches, whatever it may be, comes in. So the understanding that I think is very important for everybody out there is your business starts with social media, most likely. Then it goes into the podcast. What you do after you do the podcast episode is just as important as what you're doing on the podcast episode. That's such an important thing that we need to understand is if you're doing a level 7 out of 10 in your podcast, right? You're doing level 7 quality, level 7 time commitment. What is your time commitment on social media? What is your time commitment in your private Facebook group? What is your time commitment to creating free value? And then what is your time commitment to potential clients? And then it breaks down even more. Social media is you posting, but another good habit or a good task for you is if you could build 3 new relationships every single day with somebody on social media, just touching base and saying, hey, I hope all is well. Those people then might tap more into your social media. They might listen to the podcast. They might download the freebie. That's the really important thing is you have to be at all times moving people through the business and figuring out where they're the best fit for where they are. And that's a mistake a lot of people make. They assume this person isn't going to pay me, so they're going to be a listener forever. That's not necessarily true. If you had a Facebook group, they might go in the Facebook group and they might get the confidence to reach out to you, or they might find more value, or they would say, well, I'm part of the Facebook group. I listen to this. I watch it on YouTube. I like the social media. Maybe I will give this a shot. Another thing I'll say is don't be afraid to do free calls. Don't be afraid to do free calls. One of the reasons I do free calls, well, one of the bigger reasons, honestly, is because I get to understand our target demographic at a deeper level. So if you hop on the phone with me as a podcaster, I'm going to learn more about what podcasters are struggling with. That's part one. Part two is this. My goal on a free call is to add as much value to you as humanly possible. You might get to the end of the call and say, wow, that was very valuable. How much money does it take to work with you? What does it look like working with you? What are your packages? Blah, blah, blah. What's your hourly rate? Based on the fact that I added value to you. So maybe the bottom of your business model isn't paid right now. Maybe it's free calls. And you literally put your link for a free call in your show notes and you hammer them. You do as many as you can with the hopes that you'll add enough value or somebody will say, what does it take to work for you or work with you? You can also, if you want, and you're new, and this is a great hack that a lot of people are against, but I think it's wonderful, start coaching for free. It doesn't mean you're devaluing yourself if you're coaching for free. It means that you're trying to get the ball rolling. You're trying to get the ball rolling. And here's the interesting thing when you coach for free. When you coach somebody for free, a lot of people think to themselves, I'm not making any money, so it's not worth it. But this is what happens. When you're coaching somebody behind the scenes, they're getting to know you, They're liking you more and they trust you more. And they're getting more value. They're going to like your social media content. They're going to listen to your podcast. They might post in your Facebook group. They might talk about your freebie. And they might refer you, not only your coaching, but the podcast as well. So that free call might actually give you 5, 10, 15 different outcomes that you would never get if you didn't do it. So this really is the through line of this entire episode. Because again, it's very hard to go all the way into this because everybody's different. It's hard to be specific. You can really only add a certain amount of value based on the certain level of specificity in the episode. So again, reach out if you want to talk more about this. Totally free. I'm happy to do it. This is the thought I want you to have. Am I giving as much effort on social media as I am the podcast? Am I giving as much effort in the private Facebook group as the podcast and social media, and then all the way down your business? That's a question to ask. But the first question is, do I actually have a business setup? Or am I doing a podcast and hoping people are going to reach out? I would not say that is a business. I would say that is you marketing and talking and hoping people are going to reach out. A hope is not a business plan. And that's why I'm so passionate about this, because for a lot of podcasters out there, there's just a couple of tweaks you got to make. You just got to make a couple tweaks. There's too many kinks in the business model. I talked to somebody today, one of our clients, and she was talking about how she expected results sooner. And I said, you have to understand, in the very beginning when you started your podcast, you weren't very consistent. And I was very kind about this, where we have a very good relationship. You weren't very consistent. Your website wasn't set up. You couldn't even monetize because part of your website wasn't available. And you had a bunch of kinks in your business. Of course, it didn't work to the level you wanted it to because you weren't doing the same levels. You weren't focused on level 10, level 10, level 10, level 10. That's why I'm telling you we should do blank, 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 and blank. Because we didn't have a sustainable business yet. Because we were just getting off the ground trying to get consistency built in. So I want you to think about that. When you are thinking about your podcast, are you just thinking about it as a podcast? Or are you thinking about it as a business? Where the podcast is your opportunity to talk directly to your listeners. But after that episode, where do they go? And why do they go there? That is a wonderful question for you to ask every single episode. Where do people go? There's your call to action, right? Ideally for me, after this episode, people will say, oh, where do I go? Oh, I want to go do a free call with Kev. That's ideal, right? Because right now I don't have a Facebook group for this. And I don't have a freebie for this. Because most of my time is being spent on Next Level You. We do 7 episodes a week there. I do 1 episode a week here. My current bandwidth just does not allow me to do that much more than I'm already doing. But the point with Next Level Podcast Growth You right now is way more value than anything else. I'm a podcast coach. I love talking podcasts. This helps me build my credibility and area of expertise, and it helps me build my credibility as a podcast quote unquote expert and coach. That's one of the reasons I'm doing it. But I also understand that if I don't have somewhere for the listeners to go next, the podcast won't grow that much. So I'm under that assumption. I have that understanding. So my expectations are very accurate with that. So that's what I would say. This is the other thing too. How much time am I in here? 23 minutes in. You have to understand the time that goes into this. You have to understand the time that goes into this. So the first year, again, anytime I talk about the podcast, I'm talking about Next Level You. The first year, I don't think we made any money. I think the second year, I think we made $8,000. So I think year 1 was 0, year 2 was 8. I think year 3 was 40. Then we went, I believe, to maybe I think it was 150, I think. And then 5th year, because we started in 2017. Yeah, 5th year should be right around 300,000. But think about that. 0 to 8,000 8,000 to 40,000, 40 to 150, 150 to 300. And again, I'm not 100% certain of those numbers. That's ballpark. It's around there. But if we quit after the first year, we would say, we can never make money. If we quit after the second year, we'd say $8,000 isn't enough to live off of. If we quit after the third year, we would have said, $40,000 is pretty good. But when you're splitting that two ways, it's not sustainable. But we were focused on this. We were focused on how do we add as much value as possible at each business level. So I want you to think of it that way. Doing the podcast isn't enough. Adding value on the podcast just isn't enough. Now, again, we're in this interesting landscape where we have shows that are getting bought by Spotify or whatever it is, and they're getting paid a lot of money. But they're getting paid a lot of money based on their listens. They have a lot of listens. Joe Rogan has a lot of listens. That's why Spotify is willing to give him $100 million for however many years it was. So that's an important distinction. Most podcasts don't get to the point where they're actually going to monetize based on listens alone. I would say all podcasts can monetize on coaching. Or whatever, I guess I'll say this, whatever the bottom of your business funnel, your business plan, your business design is, whatever the bottom of that is, probably won't be sponsorships or ads. It'll be some sort of value add. That's what I'll say. It has to be a value add, not I'm going to rely on the amount of listens I have. And this is my example for that. Sure, you could go get a sponsorship and maybe make $100 a month. That's definitely in the realm of possibility. You might even be able to get $1,000 a month if you do it right and you have good connections. Cool. Definitely possible. But for most of us, that won't happen. So say $100 a month. We'll just say that. You could also go get one client at $50 an hour who you coach every other week and you have the same $100, and that client is pouring back into the business. Ads will send people away. Clients will bring more people in, and people will be they'll be more consistent. They will be more bought in. It will mean more to them. It's more personal to them when they're working with you at the bottom of your business funnel, at the bottom of your business model. So that's what I wanted to jam on today. I'm losing my voice because I've been on so many podcasts over the last month. I am struggling with my voice, honestly. The first step, you got to think of your podcast as a business. And what that means is you have to add value at every layer, every single day, and that has to be your main focus. And then you just have to let time do its thing. I call it persistent patience. You are persistent, and every day you're doing the right things, but you're also patient and not expecting it to happen right away. Many, many people quit far too soon, like long before. Sometimes it's long before they're about to make it, and other times it's right before they're about to make it. So don't fall into that trap. Last thing I'll add, don't be afraid to do free calls early. You don't necessarily have to have everything built in, all of your business model dialed in, every layer dialed in. It doesn't necessarily have to be that in the beginning. The way we did it is we went to the very bottom of our business model, our business funnel, and we started coaching for free. And then coaching for free turned into $50 an hour to $75 an hour to $100 an hour to $125, and it moved its way up. But the beautiful thing is we were building real relationships with our listeners throughout that coaching. So that's what we did. We went and got clients that allowed us to pour money back into the podcast, thus growing the brand, giving us more time to coach, thus pouring money back in. That's how we built it. Understand this. A business, you must make money. The money must be reinvested back into the business to grow the business, to make more money, to grow the business, to make more money, to grow the business, to make more money. That is a sustainable business. And that's why I think the ads and that sort of thing is just a dangerous game. So that is all I will talk about today. I think that's a good place to stop because, again, I could definitely go very, very deep into this, but I think that I don't want to overwhelm you. And I think a good first step for most people is to walk me through your business model. Where do people go next? Why do they go there? And how do you get them there? And is it cohesive? Is it fluid? Or is there some sort of kink in the business model? All right, my friends, as always, I am happy to hop on a totally free 30-minute call. If you're interested, I'm not going to sell you anything. I just want to add value. I will quite literally help you set up the business model that you need if we do that call. And I will not sell you on anything. I just want to add as much value as possible. And as always, if you are looking for help in the podcast game, whether it's audio editing, video editing, teaser clips, YouTube, any of that, please reach out. Next Level Podcast Solutions. We have done over 2,000 episodes. Not only for us, but for other clients as well, all over the world. And it's truly, truly wonderful how much time you can save when you are able to find a good quality team who knows what you're trying to produce in the world. So please reach out if you're interested in that. Everything you need to know is in the show notes and all the links as well. As always, podcast growth people, thank you for tuning in. I hope you learned something valuable today. I am always here if you need me. I'm just a DM away. And I look forward to talking to you on our next episode. As always, keep on podcasting.